Yesterday, Dale decided to go to one of the local thrift shops here in town, and he brought me home two books for me, which was unusual. He went to a thrift here in town, a local thrift, and he never does that, but I guess he was looking around, I'm not sure what possessed him. But he ended up bringing home two books for me. One was the Troubles of Biddy. And don't worry, for those of you who don't want to hear me read a nursery rhyme, I won't do it immediately. This will come at the very end. But there's some interesting history about this particular book. So I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Then he brought me home this book. Well, actually, three books showed up on my doorstep yesterday. One of them I ordered. And then the other one that he brought me home was Van Loon's Lives. And it's interesting. I've not spent a lot of time with this one. It talks about some famous people. And it's like, I think it's pretending, let's read this. Being a true and faithful account of a number of highly interesting meetings with certain historical personages, from Confucius and Plato to Voltaire and Thomas Jefferson, about whom we had always felt a great deal of curiosity and who came to us as our dinner guests in a bygone year. Written and illustrated by Hendrik Wilhelm van Loon, 1942, Simon & Schuster, New York. It's a beautiful book. So I'm not really sure exactly what these are about, but I think they sound interesting. Here's one of the pictures. The birds had come to hear St. Francis preach. And here's what that looks like. I don't know if these are fictional stories about famous people or if they're real accounts. I'm not really sure. He knows that I like to read. And so he brought these home to me. The other book that I got yesterday, so I got three books yesterday, which is pretty cool. The Sabian Oracle by Linda Hill, 360 Degrees of Wisdom. She's a different type of astrologer. And basically what she says, and she has studied the work of, enjoy, she signed it, which is nice, Elsie Wheeler, back in 1925, okay? So Linda has studied the work of Elsie Wheeler and another gentleman that Elsie worked with. But in 1925, maybe I should take these off. I guess I don't want too much glare. Elsie Wheeler, back in 1925, she was very much in touch with the outer realm, very, very psychic. And she wasn't an astrologer, which I find interesting. I don't know how she came to understand and devise this system that she did. But basically, what this book is about, it's about astrology and the premise that for every degree in astrology, like, I don't know if you guys ever, Virgo, 22 degrees, Virgo, whatever, that there is a picture associated with that astrological time period. Like, just for instance, I think you add +1 whatever's going on. Gemini 17. Today's the 17th, so we'll just do this one. The picture of what that degree is about is this idea that Elsie Wheeler came up with. The head of a robust youth changes into that of a mature thinker. I mean, they're interesting things. There's certain days when you just notice a bluebird. It's like, wow, for a couple days, it's like, what's up with all these birds, or why am I seeing, there's a theme. I don't know if you guys pay attention, but you look around and there's like a theme. And that's kind of what this is saying. And what I have found since I started following Linda Hill's work is that I see it play out. And usually before she says it, because I don't watch her stuff every single day, but I'll go back and I'm like, yeah, I've been seeing that. Back in 1925, Elsie Wheeler, along with her male partner, and I don't remember what his name is offhand, but Basically, they sat down, and for every degree of the zodiac, she came up with a system that for every single degree of the zodiac, there is this play being portrayed, because it's more than just one picture. It's like it's like a snapshot, and it's an interesting one. So Scorpio 17 is a woman filled with her own spirit is the father of her own child, which is interesting. That's just weird. And then she always has some other work over here, some other, like, here's another quote, and Scorpio 16, just to give you an idea, a girl's face breaking into a smile. So it's kind of, it's an idea and a feeling. Every zodiac sign, there are 30 degrees. Each degree has a picture that goes with it. So on any given day, there's always more than one thing going on, because if it's Virgo 20, there's something opposite it. So, those two things are going on. And then if they're, depending on what's going on at any given day, basically the idea of this book is that, like, our birth dates, full moons, any day, any time of the day, there is a picture of what's happening. And since this got on my radar, is, number one, most astrologers never talk about this. So I found that interesting. Number two, I found it to be true. You'll notice all of a sudden it's like, wow, everybody's talking about wearing hats, or why are there so many doves? It's like everywhere I look around, there's a dove. Or all of a sudden, there's lots of talk of the military, because there's one, like, I forget what the name of it is, but where, it's the military marching through the streets. And it's just really fascinating to me that these are right on target. And so what you can do with this book is, number one, you can look at, your birthday. That's an easy way to use this. And you see all the different degrees, because there's more than just one degree. There's more than one thing to look at in a birth date. And you kind of get an idea. You get a picture idea, which I'm very visual, so I think it's another reason this fascinated me. You get a picture of who you are. And yeah, there's the things that are out in the open. There's your sun sign and your moon sign, and there's all this other stuff going on. But it gives you a visual picture of what's happening for that day. And like I said, since this got on my radar, I have noticed, even before I hear her talk about it, a theme going on. And sometimes it's about children. Sometimes it's about the military. But I'm telling you, it's crazy, spooky how on target these things are. So Elsie Wheeler basically sat down, I don't know, in what amount of time she did it, but they just pulled cards out and said, okay, Virgo 22, and she said what came to her mind. And the woman was just very much in tune with the stars and astrology. And like I said, the interesting thing was she wasn't even into astrology. She wasn't an astrologer. So that's interesting. So, I don't know how she did what she did, but it's interesting. I'm glad to have this book, because I am fascinated by patterns and what's the underlying theme of whatever's going on. And this is one of those ways. It's kind of like a code breaker book, and I'm glad to have it. So thank you, Linda, for writing this book, and I'm thrilled to have it. So anyway, there's that one, the Sabian Oracle. So, but today we're going to talk about this book. With my channel, like I said, I'm not going to read this book until the very end, so if you're interested, just hang in there. But when I read through this book, number one, I love illustrations because I'm an artist. And I was thinking, these illustrations, these look familiar. They feel familiar. It's called The Troubles of Biddy, A Pretty Little Story by Isabel Byram. Drawings by Margaret Evans Price. So when I finished reading this story last night, it's like, these feel so familiar. I want to know about this Margaret Evans Price. And guess what I found out about her? She was a prolific illustrator, and she was one of the co-founders of Fisher-Price Toys. I think a lot of her illustrations were the basis for toys like the Little People. And I don't know about you, but I used to love those when I was a kid. They had the little barn and the little people with the sweet little faces. And I'm gonna try to come in close so you can see some of these. I'm just gonna go kind of like that so you can see some of these illustrations. But look at that. How sweet that is. Just adorable. Simple, beautiful illustrations. And this was published in 1917, so this book is almost 100 years old, so that's pretty cool. And she was born in 1888 she was from a wealthy family. In her illustration career, I don't know when Fisher-Price was created, but she was instrumental in these toys and these stories. These are gorgeous. I'm seeing that, like every other page, the print quality, like it's a different type of paper, and some of these are so fine. And look at this one. Look at that page. I just love it. Just a beautiful illustration. But then the other side isn't okay. It's a different quality. I'm going to see if Dale can make me some kind of a frame that's sort of a shadow box, like the center page. Look at that. Both of these pages have very beautiful illustrations. And they're very simple, but they're gorgeous. And I knew, it's like, these just feel familiar to me. So I was really excited that I took the time to look it up, and I'm like, ha, she was somebody special. These little faces are the basis of like the Little People. And then you see, like on these two pages, these are beautiful illustrations. However, the paper is a different quality, so they're just not as fine. They're not as fine to look at. And the front cover is interesting, but it's definitely it's seen better days, and it's not of the same quality. It's got that rougher texture to it. But so I want to display this in some way where I can enjoy and maybe open up different pages. So I want him to make me a frame that I can open, and I can turn the page if I want to, because these are adorable little pictures. And this is a simple little story. But yeah, I guess this was a series of books, because this says number 49 on it, so I'm guessing she did several. And this last one, this may be my favorite. This and the front cover. I love the front cover. I just think it feels Art Nouveau-ish. I love that. I can see why they picked it for the cover. And then this may be my favorite illustration in here. There is an Art Nouveau feel to these. So I'm going to read this to you because I thought that it was interesting because of the history of Margaret Evans Price. But yeah, she was one of the founders of Fisher-Price Toys. So here we go. Thank you for my Biddy book.
I saw that Biddy book and I thought of you. I have cornmeal in my shirt.
Can you see the cornmeal? You can't see that.
Well, now I mentioned it, they can.
The Troubles of Biddy, number 49. A Pretty Little Story by Isabel Byram. Drawings by Margaret Evans Price. The Hubble-Levins Company, New York. The Troubles of Biddy. Oh dear, sighed old Biddy, just under her breath. I really am troubled and worried to death. For months I have thought of a family, dear, to gladden my heart and to live with me here. But daily I find that my plans are upset, and all I can do is to sit here and fret. I haven't a sign of an egg in my nest. though some I have laid are as good as the best. I scolded last night when my mistress came near, but though she was bitten, she seemed not to fear. She only said, "Biddy, what are you about?" And then through the doorway she simply passed out. I don't understand it, I cannot see why, for surely to be a good mother I'd try, although I would see that they did as I said, and Biddy in sorrow and grief hung her head. So deep was the longing of poor Biddy's heart, she felt that with life she was ready to part. But glancing about in her trouble and pain, she saw that her mistress was coming again. And noting the basket she held in her hand, old Biddy thought quickly she can't understand. "And what is she doing?" exclaimed in surprise, for out of the nest Biddy felt herself rise. As Biddy stood resting her poor weary legs, she saw that the basket contained shining eggs, and mistress with care placed them all in the nest, for Biddy to snuggle beneath her warm breast. Now Biddy was happy, her burden was gone, her troubles had vanished, she felt she had none. And planning away in her little straw bed, no thoughts of complaining came into her head. She looked from the window each morning at dawn, and pictures of rapture were constantly drawn, for out on the lawn near a little old shed were dishes and troughs where the chickens were fed. And Biddy thought wisely, "These things I shall use, the largest and neatest are what I shall choose." But never a thought did this wise mother take of danger or trouble in St. Mary's Lake. How happy she was when the first sounds were heard, and the bright downy heads her soft feathers stirred. "But what is the matter with each little nose?" she said in amazement, "and what ails their toes? They are not like chickens at all, I am sure. I wonder whatever such strange things will cure." And Biddy once more was in trouble most deep, for none of her children could really say peep. "I think that my babes for a walk ought to go." One morning said Biddy, "I'll lead them just so. I'll watch every minute lest danger arise, for they'll not be safe when from under my eyes." At the word every downy ball hustled about, and ere Biddy knew it, they all had jumped out of the nest and were darting about in the sun, for bugs and for grass blades and simply for fun. Biddy watched for a time and then softly said, "I ought to be dusting my feathers and head." So off to the roadside she hastily went, and there in the soft sand a few moments spent. What was it made Biddy's heart quiver and leap? It wasn't the sound of a young chicken's peep, but the splashing of water and fluttering of wings, and leaving the roadside she screamed of all things. Her babies were all in the watering trough, regardless of sickness, disease, and of cough. "Oh dear," cried poor Biddy, "what now shall I do? My children will drown, and before my eyes too." And mistress cried, "Biddy, now please don't you fear. They simply love water, and oh, aren't they dear? I'll keep them all safe, so Biddy go away, and let your poor children have freedom to play." Each day in the trough and the puddles they played, and off where the grass was the deepest they stayed, while Biddy would search for them clucking for hours, over the barnyard and in 'mong the flowers. The little log barn was a refuge at night, where often poor Biddy for courage would fight. And there with her feathers above her young brood, she tried to instruct them in ways to be good. Where apples were juicy and mellow one day, these 10 naughty children were gathered to play, when suddenly one of them, leading the band, said, "Come, let us travel," and there a trip planned. So off they all went toward the shed and the pump, turning out now and then for a log or a stump. And down the steep hill, where the clover bloomed bright, the little band wandered in perfect delight. The moment that Biddy discovered the plot, she rushed in confusion and soon reached the spot. "Oh, children, be careful," she screamed in alarm. "In the lake I'm sure you will meet with some harm." But to cry and protest and urge them to come seemed all of no use, for they would not go home. And Biddy exclaimed to herself in disgust, "To stand this I cannot, and leave them I must." The evening shades gathered that night in the sky. The wind sung most softly a sweet lullaby. But Biddy had left her dear children alone. She found they were ducklings, and such could not own. The end. The Troubles of Biddy. Illustrated by Margaret Evans Price. Copyright 1917 in Rochester, New York. A Pretty Little Story by Isabel Byram. I think Margaret Evans Price, her most famous book was The Night Before Christmas. So interesting. I'm really glad that he brought this home to me. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this and have a fabulous day.